Now
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:06. It's a very busy Monday morning here as, well, let's face it, we're living in a whole new world now. The Unity Party, as Robert F. Kennedy Jr. suspends his presidential campaign and gives a full-throated, enthusiastic endorsement to Donald Trump, even appearing on a Trump rally stage with him in Phoenix. He did interviews over the weekend, and, I mean, it could very well be the game changer here. We're going to wait and see how it sorts out, but we'll analyze it going forward. Plus, coming up at 7:35, Tom Fitton of Judicial Watch will join us. I'm Larry O'Connor, and back from her long, like months-long vacation.
You're ridiculous.
Julie Gunlock is right back where she belongs. Welcome back.
Good morning.
I say that because I'm about to go on vacation, and everybody gives me trouble, let's say, when I go on vacation. So I'm trying to inoculate myself. Joining us now, as he always does at this time on a Monday, is our legal analyst and former U.S. Attorney to the District of Columbia, Joe diGenova. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning.
What's this I hear that a potential pick for Attorney General in a Kamala Harris presidency would be none other than the failed, incompetent, activist U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Matthew Graves, the man who has put murderers back on the street and refuses to convict carjackers and has spent hundreds of millions of dollars focusing on January 6th rather than the real problems of D.C. Please tell me this isn't happening.
Oh, this is ready to go. Matthew Graves, the incompetent and failed United States Attorney for the District of Columbia, who has spent almost his entire term worrying about January 6th defendants and nothing else, is absolutely the lock to be the next Attorney General of the United States if Kamala Harris becomes president. Their families are intertwined. The Graves family, Matthew Graves' wife, is personally very close to Kamala Harris. They've known each other for years. And so, and there's been a lot of communication between that office and the vice president's office during all of this stuff. So it's a lock. There's just no doubt about it. He's the one.
He, as I said, has acted as an activist in his time as U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, but also his wife is an incredibly active and radical activist, isn't she?
Yes, absolutely. She's one of the foremost leftists in the United States and is involved in all sorts of activities involving abortion, election engineering, you name it, top to bottom, as far as just plugged in completely.
And this Matthew Graves and his wife are also really connected to other powerful figures in the media. So we don't expect any sort of negative media about these people. They will be greeted just like Kamala's been greeted, as sort of, with a ticker tape parade rather than any tough questions.
Well, when you're part of the group, when you're part of the clan, when you're part of the people that govern, and you share the governing progressive philosophy, which is to basically destroy Western civilization, have contempt for the Constitution as we know it, not the Constitution the way they want it to be, contempt for the United States Supreme Court, that's what you get. These are radical leftists from the 1960s, all gussied up in moderate attire, just like Kamala Harris.
Yeah, let's talk about the nominee for president for the Democrats officially now after last week's Democratic National Convention in Chicago. I found it fascinating, Joe, and I thought about you a lot as I was watching the convention, that when Vice President Harris or all of the illustrious Democrats got up on that stage to talk about her record, they didn't mention anything about her 3.5 years as vice president, and they barely mentioned anything about her time as a U.S. senator. They kept going back to her being a prosecutor, being a DA in San Francisco, and being Attorney General in California. I wonder, what does that tell you, this whole emphasis on her being a prosecutor? She's going to be the prosecutor in the White House.
Well, this is their rather lame and clumsy effort to draw a distinction between, first of all, abandoning her 3.5 years as vice president. They're trying to make you forget that she, along with Biden, are responsible for the horrible economic and foreign policy woes that we find ourselves in now. This is an effort to change the subject by making you think she was a really tough prosecutor in San Francisco and in California, when in fact she wasn't. She was a vindictive prosecutor, and there is a difference between being tough on crime and being vindictive as a prosecutor. And she was the latter. She was a vindictive prosecutor. She didn't, for example, one of her biggest failings was failure to investigate the abuse by priests of young boys in San Francisco, in the San Francisco diocese, because she was fearful of the power of the Catholic Church in San Francisco. And she did everything she could and refused to assist the victims of those crimes when they filed civil suits after the statute of limitations had run out. She refused to cooperate with the sexual victims of the sexual abuse by priests in the Diocese of San Francisco. She is a politician. She's not a prosecutor. She's never been a U.S. attorney. She's never had the opportunity to really run an office and know something about it. One of the things prosecutors, reporters never ask her is, Madam Vice President, how many cases did you actually try when you were the district attorney and you were attorney general? How many cases did you actually try to verdict in front of a jury? Have you ever heard that question asked ever? No. This is our American media. I mean, exemplified by Jonathan Karl. I must say, I used to think Jonathan was a helpless, hapless, nice little boy kind of guy who worked at ABC News. But after watching that performance over the weekend with Tom Cotton, I must say, he's pathetic.
Yeah.
It's an embarrassment.
Yeah, Joe, and I think Jonathan Karl, what he did that in that interview, you know, RFK was trying to talk about that, was trying to talk about how the press is now simply sort of an adjunct of the Democratic Party. What do you think? What do you think? Which he's absolutely right. But what do you think about the RFK endorsement and about what RFK had to say about the state of the Democrat Party?
Well, I disagree with most of the pundits who think it's a wash. It's not. This is a massive change in this campaign. I think that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. coming out for Trump took the bounce, took the non-existent Beyonce bounce out of the Harris post-convention bounce. I just think this really took the wind out of their sails, and they proved it by immediately condemning him. And after watching his sister rip into him on national television, the Kennedy family still has a problem. And the problem is the Kennedy family. They're strange people. Here's a guy who's trying to be honest about his feelings and his sentiments about American public policy and about the Democratic Party. And what do the automatons in the Kennedy family do? They go after their brother and assault him unmercifully for having independent views about politics. I mean, if the Kennedys want the kind of progressive politics we've had for the last 3.5 years, I mean, they're entitled to like disaster and to like incompetence, and most of them display it in wild displays of incompetence in their public appearances. I give RFK A+ marks. I think he's a fascinating guy, and I think he's going to deliver key votes in key states to Trump that may very well make the difference.
All right, Joe diGenova, it's always good to talk with you. And for our listeners, we will be getting to that Tom Cotton, Jonathan Karl exchange on ABC's This Week a little bit later. But that was a good preview from Joe diGenova for you. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Julie and Larry. Thank you very much.
WMAL. Making sense of the news.
Live
from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
It's 7:17. It's O'Connor and Company. I'm Julie Gunlock alongside Larry O'Connor. Good morning, Larry.
Good morning.
So, I live in Alexandria, Virginia. I talk about it a little bit on the
I thought about you. Your neighborhood is a little bit in the news right now.
Yeah, they're a little bit in the news. There is a small park about, I don't know, little ways from my house, not too far. It's called a tot lot. It has very low, toys for kids. It's a playground for very little kids, toddlers. Okay, not that big.
And it's not, I mean, this is not a plot of land that someone could develop or anything.
No. Yeah. This would be a small a plot of land where a small house could go up.
Maybe a garage.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it happens to be, go ahead.
I just want to point out, we're not naming this park.
No.
On purpose. There are people in the media who are going out of their way to name the park, so should tell you exactly where it's located.
Yeah.
And the reason is that this is a Secret Service issue.
Right. So the Secret Service has decided to close down this park because of its proximity to J.D. Vance's house. He bought this house last year. He, won his election, moved to D.C. That's what happened. You buy a house. And this particular neighborhood is Del Rey, which I consider sort of ground zero for the communists in Alexandria. And it's where the mayor lives. It's a very liberal area of Alexandria. And he bought a house there. And the neighbors were unwelcoming. They put trans flags all over the neighborhood.
This is when he moved as a newly elected senator.
Yes. And they put trans flags all over the neighborhood and were generally unfriendly. Now, because, Trump was nearly assassinated, the Secret Service has reassessed that neighborhood, which, it's a regular neighborhood, right, with public streets. And they've decided to close this park, this very small park that is very close to Vance's home. And the neighbors have gone bonkers.
This is for security purposes.
For security purposes. Again, this is not Vance's decision. This is a Secret Service decision. They've decided to cut out, to sort of shut down a part of the street and then close this park. Inconvenient. I will give you that. Kind of annoying. I will give you that. But the reaction from the neighbors are to blame Vance. And this weekend, they had a party. The tot lot was officially closed yesterday.
Okay.
So on Saturday, they had a gathering. These neighbors had a little party where they passed out, sort of Democrat paraphernalia. They, Kamala bracelets and, stuff for the campaign, for the Harris-Walz campaign. And they were all gathered there. Can you imagine? Yeah. I mean, this park is in view of the Vance. So,
of course.
One of the women that was there actually posted a picture on social media and put a red arrow pointing to Vance's house.
And it even says,
this is where Vance lives.
Right.
J.D. Vance's
so basically
house.
Putting out on social media, we're at this park, we're having this pro-Kamala party.
Yep.
Because we're ticked off that the Secret Service, for security purposes, is going to close this
bragging
park.
about it. We're here. Right. We're harassing the Vance family.
And by the way, here's where he lives.
Yes,
basically,
with a big red arrow.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine the cruelty of that?
Yeah.
The inviting people to harass that family, terrorize that family. We've seen this in Alexandria before. We've seen Trump officials, sort of a Alexandria version of Antifa, gather around Trump officials' houses, scaring their families. Right. We've seen it before. But this was really outrageous, especially considering the fact that Trump was also almost assassinated just 6 weeks ago.
Right. And
so
this is temporary.
Yes. And
this is obviously temporary.
The woman who did it, her name is Becky, and it's on Twitter, by the way. You can look at my feed. She is a lawyer. She's Harvard educated, of course. She's a lawyer for an environmental group. I mean,
she's an activist.
She's an activist, but she's, she should know better that this is incredibly dangerous.
Well, she does know better. She doesn't care.
I know.
In fact, she got so much pushback on it that she's now locked up all of her social media accounts because she recognizes that
yes, she made a mistake.
She made a mistake or deliberately did this, and she didn't think she would get pushback because they live in such a bubble over there. This is obviously temporary. I don't know why we're making such a big deal out of it, why it's become even a news story.
Well, you mentioned earlier when we were talking before, the area where Obama lives in D.C.
Yes, the block of Colorama neighborhood in Washington, D.C. And I checked this just now to ensure that this is the case. You'll remember the Obamas, after they were president and First Lady, decided to stay in D.C. They bought a house in the Colorama neighborhood.
That's right.
They're still
there.
They told us they were doing that just because their children wanted to graduate high school.
Yeah,
okay, fine. Well, they are still there. They're still living there. They're there all the time. And as of now, that block is still closed to traffic. Not just, we're going to take over a little toddler park. No, The entire block
Yeah.
has been closed to traffic for 8
And Becky
years
hasn't
now
gotten upset about that.
because of the Secret Service in the Kalorama neighborhood. And those are the specific security measures. And by the way, the fact that I've just Googled that means that I'm going to end up on somebody's list as a potential assassin or something. What's the security provisions for Obama's house in Kalorama? But no, it is still there. It's Belmont Road,
I want to
by
also,
the way.
I also want to be clear. This JD Vance, that Delray neighborhood is the same neighborhood where a crazed Bernie bro tried to kill 24 Republicans, and the reaction from that community, from Delray, was, well, they kind of deserved
Maybe
it.
they shouldn't
right?
have been there
yeah,
practicing
maybe they shouldn't have been
softball.
there.
Maybe they shouldn't have
James
been there.
Hodgkinson talked to a number of city officials, and he didn't seem too out there to them.
Right.
And so this is the same city where a near assassination happened of 20. Steve
These are
Scalise was
awful
almost
people.
killed. These are awful people.
Terrible,
And then
terrible
Trump
people.
is nearly assassinated, and his VP candidate, so Secret Service, makes the decision to harden the area around his house, and the angry Alexandria white. I mean, talk about privilege. Can you imagine? That you're that upset about a tot lot
Right.
being closed down? That screams privilege.
And then put it on social media and with big red ink saying, here's where JD lives.
Yeah.
And there's like literally a picture of his house. You can like see and recognize it. Well, the good news is for all of your neighbors there in Delray is that after November, they won't have to worry about this because JD Vance will be moving to the Naval Observatory on Massachusetts. It's 7:23.
Now,
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
Well, what are you going to do? It's 7:37. It's O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in on this busy Monday morning as we tackle the news events in the way you expect us to. It's Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
We've got the president of Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton, joining us right now. Tom, always good to check in with you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. How are you both?
We're well, thank you. And we're very grateful to you and the great team that you've got at Judicial Watch for continuing to pursue the debacle that occurred at the Secret Service that led to the assassination attempt of Donald Trump just 6 weeks ago. And this latest result that you've been able to engineer with this FOIA request about what the priorities at that agency have been for the last couple of years really do shed quite a bit of light on how we got here. Tell me what you learned.
Well, we began investigating that crazy story about Kamala's agent or the agent on her detail, who by all reports kind of went crazy and had to be detained. And, one of the questions we had were, because the concern was from agents around, was that the hiring standards were different and you had this DEI obsession. Sure enough, the documents show there is a DEI obsession at the Secret Service. It's not just an obsession, it's the organizing principle of the agency. The records reveal that DEI, again, this is a quote from the document itself. The collective duty of one of the organizations that are helping implement DEI to Secret Service is to, quote, help the Secret Service build, foster, create, and inspire a workforce where diversity and inclusion is not, quote, just talked about, unquote, but demonstrated by all employees through every action every day. All capped, the words are all capitalized, bolded. Every action every day. And when you look at every action every day, and then you go through these trainings they have in the documents, there's 300 plus pages, they show that they want you to monitor your colleagues for offensive comments. And of course, their definition of offensive is what would trigger a leftist or a liberal. For instance, if someone objects to these trainings, it's evidence of discrimination. You talk about crime in a way that talks about black crime. That's evidence of discrimination. They want you to monitor your colleagues' social media posts. That's evidence of discrimination. And as I noted online this weekend, it's all designed to create racial strife and division and set employee against employee. And no wonder they can't do their job. No wonder misconduct is rising. And frankly, no wonder, Trump was nearly killed, given the distractions the agency's making their employees go through.
Well, the Secret Service is part of the Department of Homeland Security, and there was news this week that the Department of Homeland Security's number one priority is also DEI. We have this trickle-down effect. It is just astonishing what has happened to these two agencies since Mayorkas took over, and yet he is still in office. Is Congress going to do, you come out with this latest information, which is damaging. Is anything going to come of this, or are we just waiting for a new administration to go in?
Oh, Congress is on vacation for 6 weeks. They don't get back till September, right? Do you get a 6-week vacation at the station there?
No.
Believe it or not, no. I'm sure they're all working back in their districts.
Now I know the manager's thinking, "Oh, they're on vacation every day," but that's another matter.
You know the boss well, don't you?
But all jokes aside, Congress is AWOL. The Republican House is not going to do anything for the rest of the year. And I exaggerate slightly because they obviously will do some things. But in terms of the substantive work that you're talking about, Julie, no, they impeached Mayorkas. That's done. They're not going to impeach Biden. Like these records, for instance, aren't just about the Secret Service. They're agency-wide. So the Department of Homeland Security, an important agency, monitoring the border, security threats here at home from foreign terrorists and things like that, they're obsessed with this. I mean, these documents are their documents, and Congress is AWOL. And so to me, it's inexcusable. And, we want Congress to do the right thing, but that's why we do our own lawsuits. Otherwise, nothing would get much of done. Anything would get done.
What were we all unaware of some rampant sexism and discrimination going on at the Secret Service up until this brand new push for DEI? Was there a problem that needed to be solved there? Did we have a lot of complaints from women that they were not being able to give an equal opportunity there because of their gender? Where did all of this come from? Is this just sort of the poison that infiltrates every bureaucracy, and the Secret Service is not, to be held up at the pristine level of quality and professionalism we always thought they were? They're just like the Department of Education at this point. They're just like the Department of Agriculture. They're just another bureaucracy, and they all do the same thing, and they've taken their eye off the prize.
My perception is it's a numbers game. If they don't think the numbers are what they're supposed to be, and the numbers change, they're not. They change based on politics. They decide their discrimination. For instance, in these documents, there are quotas for people with disability. 12% quota. People who are disabled, either mentally or physically, need to be affirmatively put on to Secret Service employee roles. Where'd that number come from? Despite, in addition to the dubious idea of making all the roles in the Secret Service subject to opportunity for people who are disabled, I don't know.
Well, surely there are jobs that can be performed within the agency regardless of whether you're disabled or not. But I guess the bigger issue here is the priorities that are being articulated by the leadership of this agency are not singularly focused on their one task at hand and the most important task in that matter.
Well, they don't limit it. You just put out a common sense issue there. Of course, you don't want to knock someone off the opportunity list because of the disability if it doesn't necessarily impact the job.
Right.
That's not the rules they follow. They say all jobs.
Yeah. Insane. Tom Fitton, we're good to have you, and Judicial Watch. I appreciate you joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
7:43.
On the next Vince Colonnese show, the biggest threat to the left? The truth. It tells you a lot. Join us 3 to 6 right here on WMAL.
We acknowledge today a sad remembrance. 3 years ago was the Abbey Gate terror attack that took the lives of 13 American service members. To this day, neither President Joe Biden, who led the disastrous effort that resulted in the terror attack, and these 13 fallen, to this day, Joe Biden nor Kamala Harris have even publicly mentioned one name of these fallen Marines and one Army Staff Sergeant and one Navy Petty Officer. It is obviously despicable and insulting. Joe Biden, you'll remember in his last debate performance, the last basically public political event of his career, claimed that he hadn't lost any members of the military.
That's right.
During his time in the White House. Perhaps he's forgotten about what happened 3 years ago today.
And you'll also remember that when their bodies were flown back to Dover, he was standing outside as the bodies were being taken down the ramp, and he was checking his watch.
Today, the White House has put out a printed statement. It's described as a statement from President Joe Biden on the anniversary of the terror attack. It does include the names of the 13 service members, and it says, "Today and every day we honor our fallen," but that's not really true.
No. That's not
every
every day.
Every single speech that he's given, State of the Union speech, he hasn't mentioned it either. We'll see what Kamala Harris has to say about it. You'll remember Kamala Harris bragged that she was the last person in the room advising Joe Biden on the pullout of Afghanistan.
So not forget that the Taliban just a couple days ago had a parade where they used all of the weapons from Bagram Air Force Base that were taken, that were left there. And they did this sort of showy parade of them driving the tanks and the jeeps and the helicopters. A really sickening sight to see. It didn't have to happen that way. It was a sloppy withdrawal that was not planned well. And it cost these lives, and it cost us potentially security.
Last week at a rally in North Carolina, Donald Trump mentioned the disaster in Afghanistan that we mark today, 3 years later, and he said this.
But the voters will hold Kamala and Joe accountable for this November when I take office, and they're going to be held accountable for what they've done to this country. Right? Thank you. I will ask for the resignations of every single senior military official who touched the Afghanistan disaster. I want their resignations immediately. And I want them on the desk in the Oval Office, the Resolute desk. I want them on at 12 o'clock, Inauguration Day.
And that's music to the ears of many of these Gold Star families who still have not gotten the justice that they believe their loved ones deserve. President Trump also out with a new ad against Kamala Harris.
Afghanistan.
Yes.
Were you the last person in the room?
Yes.
And you feel comfortable?
I do.
She agreed with his decision-making 100%.
That decision was to pull all of our military out first, to close down Bagram Air Base, to leave Americans behind.
Kamala Harris has touted her role on Afghanistan policy. Now she owns it too.
On the issue of Afghanistan, we have seen a successful drawdown of the embassy.
Devastating. I have to say, between Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, this might be the least experienced presidential ticket I've ever seen in my lifetime. I can't remember a ticket that has been this bad, this inexperienced.
And not just inexperienced, radical.
Yeah. Also, by the way, there's reports that President Trump's plane, Air Trump 1, I think is what they're calling it, has touched down at Reagan National, and it appears he will be participating in remembrance ceremonies at Arlington National Cemetery today.
Yeah, the Delray women are just really mad this morning.
Save our park. It's 7:53.